Hi, so today I am going to demonstrate how we can use worker threads to perform CPU intensive tasks in Node.js. Um, so in this video, I will parse of I will parse a text file, which is basically a JSON file, and uh, parse the JSON in a worker thread, and then send the parsed data or the parsed JSON object into the main thread. So to do that, let's create a folder first. Okay, so let's create a file. I will use Visual Studio Code. Open the new directory. All right, here is. So if we go to the official documentation, then we will see some template or some example code. So our code will look very similar to this one. One thing to remember is that worker thread is now stable, and you can use it without using any experimental flag while running the application. What I mean by that is worker thread was in experimental phase in older version of Node.js, but it is currently stable. So in latest version of Node.js, you don't have to do anything additional to use worker threads. So first thing first, let's import worker thread, and then so okay, we'll make use of this one. So we don't need this worker data and parent port. So first, we're gonna check if our program is in main thread or not. So if our program is not in main thread, that means our program is in worker thread. So I'll let me show you first. So if we do is main thread, so this returns a boolean value, which means if our program is running in the main thread, then the value of this is main thread is true. So let's check it out. So as you can see that we are in main thread is logged out in the console. So it means that our program is running in a main thread. So if you think about it, then when are you going to create a new thread? So you want your CPU intensive task to run in a separate thread, right? You do not want to block the main thread. So So when we are in main thread, we will create a new thread. So if we go back to the documentation, then we will see that the worker constructor receives a file, and we will not take a look here for now. We'll just for now we'll just care about the file name. So copy this one. So what we're doing here is we're creating a new worker thread. So this worker constructor, as a first parameter, it receives a file path. So why is a file path? So when we run this program, our program is gonna check if the program is running in main thread or not. If the program is running in main thread, then it's gonna speed a new thread. And what type of task that worker thread will perform is defined by the file that we are gonna pass in here. For example, let's say we are passing a file named worker.js. So we create a file worker.js, and then so let's say we're gonna do what? Let's say console dot, okay, hold on, not console.log. Copy this one. This time we don't need the worker. PAR into parent port, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, parent port. So this parent port thing is important. What this parent port does is it is a bridge between the worker thread and the main thread. So if not is main thread, it means that we are in worker thread. So in worker thread. So let's see if what happens if we run this program. Okay, so as you can see, we are seeing main thread is logged and in worker thread as well, which means that we have successfully spinned or created a new worker thread, and that worker thread is using our worker.js file, and in our worker.js file we have logged out this message in worker thread. So this time we are using not is in main thread. Why is that? Because this worker.js is used by a worker thread, not used by a main thread. So the value of is main thread will be false in this file. Okay, makes sense. So for safety we will write our code here, just to be sure that we are not running things in our main thread. So this worker thread, so to access the worker thread or to communicate with the worker thread, we're gonna use this worker variable or this worker object, whatever we say. So let's listen to some events. So message event, let me write it down first, then I'll demonstrate it. I will explain it. So exit. So this worker is listening to a couple of or three events. This worker is listening to three events. So this message event, this message event, this callback gets executed when the parent thread, this main thread, receives some data from a worker thread. So what I mean by that, let's say we are sending some data to main thread. So when this worker thread sends some data to main thread, we will be able to catch that data in this block. This data will be the payload. So same things for error. sorry. So if this worker thread face any kind of error, then this callback function will be executed. And if the worker thread get exit for some reason, for example, if we call process dot exit, it means we're exiting the worker thread. So this callback function will get executed. So let's check. Let's verify it, right? So okay, so so this time we are executing this process dot exit. What it does is it terminates the process basically. So let's see what we get in our terminal. We get exit. Why is that? Because so we're creating a thread and we are listening to these events. So what our worker thread does is it exists, and this is why this block of code is getting executed. So what if we throw an error? If we run this program, we see got an error and exit. So why is that? Sorry, it's because since we couldn't or we did not handle the error, our main thread is being terminated. If you are familiar with Node.js, then you will see that if we do not handle any error, then it's very common that our node process gets terminated. This is a very common thing. So we have to handle this error, right? So what happening is we're throwing an error, and since the worker thread is experiencing an error, so this error callback is getting executed, and since we did not handle that error, so our thread is, or our process is getting terminated. So this block of code is being executed as well. Okay, cool. So and the last thing that we're going to see is this message thing, because this is where we are going to spend most of our time in real life, right? So we're gonna do some task, or we're gonna perform some CPU intensive task here, and then we will get some result, and we'll send this result back to the main thread, right? So how can we do that? The way we can do that is using parent port. So post. So if we, as I have mentioned earlier, that parent port is a kind of bridge between main thread and worker thread. So this parent port has a function named post message. So this, what it does is it whatever the data you pass in the post message as parameter are sent to the main thread and received by this block. So if I run the code, then you will see that got message, this thing here. And why is the process or the exit message is still there? So I believe it is because our worker thread is done with it. I mean, there is nothing here to do. There is nothing to do for the worker thread. That is why the worker thread is being terminated, and our this callback is getting executed. And let's now as you can see, we have this block of code is getting executed, and if we console out the data variable as well, we will see that our message is being passed from a worker thread to main thread. All right, so now what we're going to do is do something practical. So to do that, let's install Express. So by then we do some stuff. Our server is running. See. See, we have received the sent message. So our Express server is running, so you can make an HTTP request and we'll handle the request here. So for demonstration purpose, we're not going to make it complex. So what we will do is okay, here's the message we have received. So let's make it global. We're making it global so that we can use it later. All right, so one thing that I did not show you, that how to send data from main thread to worker thread. So we have seen that using this method we can send data back to main thread, but how am I supposed to send data to the worker thread? So this is very similar to this one. If you just copy the same thing, and instead of parent port we're gonna use worker, because as you already, I mean you get it, right? Because this time we're going to send send some data to worker, so this is why worker.post message. And if this worker thread receives some data, how is it going to accept it? This is very similar to this one, but this time, as you already get it, I believe, we're gonna use parent port instead of worker. So in worker, and this is the data, and worker, let's say main thread, and if run the, okay, I think I have NodeMono installed. Yep, I do, so I don't have to restart the server every time. So everything's same. Why is that? Oh, console.log. So yeah, we have to go. Yeah, as you can see that we are logging the output in worker. This is the in worker text, and second, the value of data is sending data from main thread, which is this one, right? So we are sending data to our worker thread. So as you can see that this time we are not seeing the exit message in our console. Why is that? Because this time our worker thread is listening to a port or to an event, and this we are not done with our worker thread. Our worker thread might receive some data later in some time, so our thread can understand that when it will have to stop, and when it will have to stay awake to receive some data or to perform something. You get it, right? So let's do something practical. For example, let's assume that we are receiving a file, let's say a large file, and in that file we have JSON data. We have JSON string like this. For example, let's assume this is our large JSON large text, and our text is in this format, in a valid JSON format. So let's say what am I doing? Name is another day web. It has to be valid JSON for our purpose, for our demonstration purpose, because we're going to use the JSON.parse method, and if our string is not a valid JSON, then it's gonna throw some error. Web is nodjs site. For now, let's assume this is our large chunk of data, And what we are going to do is we're sending a message back to our client that we have received your large data. We are processing it. So just since this is um, a time-consuming operation, so we won't let our user wait for the response. Instead, we are sending them a message that okay, we are doing stuff for you. We will let you know in some time later. So yeah, is everything okay? Let me check. So we are, let's say we are receiving this from user, and then we are passing the data to our worker thread, and our worker thread is receiving the data. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is, this is the text, this one, right? So we're gonna parse the data. So to parse string to JSON object, we're gonna use JSON.parse function, and now we are done with our parsing, and we're gonna send back this data to our main thread to do, let's say, some kind of processing, for example. Okay, let's see what we're gonna do. What we'll do is the parent port dot post message, because you know this is how we send data back to main thread. So we are parsing the data and sending the data back to our main thread, and this data will be handled here. So let's say we are mailing our user about what? Okay. Okay. Let's say we are gonna send an email. Let's say sending email to user. So after finishing our task, we're sending an email to user that we're done with the processing, and also we are gonna let the user know that the website was what the website was in the string. I mean, I know this is not something realistic, but let's say for you it might be something like that, storing data into database. Maybe you might want to process this data. Let's say you're gonna check if the website is valid or not. So how are you gonna check if the website is valid or not? You're gonna let's say you are gonna send an HTTP request to this web. Let's say send HTTP request to data.web, because this is how we access the data, right? Since this is a parsed JSON object, right? So if we receive a response, then we know that our website is the data given by the user is valid. All right, so I'm not gonna do all this. I'm just gonna log a simple message. All right, so our server is running successfully, no problem with that. And now if we hit the URL again, we'll see that we have received your large error. Because why not? Because of this. And if we go back to our console, we'll see that sending email to user another date. So as you can see, we have successfully parsed that string and made it a JSON object, and then sent this valid JSON object to our main thread. So this was not for our case, this was not necessary. I mean, we could have do our processing here as well. So I'm just, for demonstration purpose, I'm just sending this data back to you, back to the main thread again. Hope this is not all. I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be covered, but I'm not an expert as well, and I'm just playing with worker threads last couple of days. So I have to check all the things that can be uh, done using the worker threads. Also, there are some things to remember that in fact, if I show you, you will see that here's the line: the worker threads are useful for performing CPU intensive JavaScript operation. They will not help much with IO intensive work. In fact, the nodes build asynchronous operations are more efficient. So you are only gonna use this worker thread when you are gonna perform some kind of CPU intensive operation, right? And also another line that I want to point out is that that this line, that the overhead of creating workers would likely exceed their benefit. What this line means is that if you check this line, then what you're gonna say is that whenever we run our application, we are gonna create a thread, right? So what if we put that code here, and instead of listening to it, I mean, yeah, we have to listen as well, and then we're gonna do this like process dot exit, maybe like this. So when we're done with our code, we're gonna exit. So that the thread is gonna terminate. Otherwise, we're gonna end up, if we do not terminate the thread, then we're gonna end up creating a lot of threads, right? So what is wrong with this code? The problem is this line. So what it means is that whenever we receive a request in this endpoint, we're going to spin up a new thread. We're going to create a new thread, but the overhead of creating a new thread is not insignificant. I mean, it might end up being some kind of like it might harm your overall experience of the user, or it might not be feasible for you, basically. So what we're gonna do is we are initially gonna create a thread, and then we're gonna reuse it. All right, we're gonna reuse it. So that's it for this video, I guess, and I hope it helps for those who are trying to understand the concept of worker threads, or looking for in fact this problem here, the parsing JSON JSON in worker thread is a very common thing. Why is that? Because if you are familiar with Node.js, you will know that JSON.parse, this function is a blocking operation. So if your file is a very large file and you do the thing here like this, then let's say this line takes 10 minutes to parse the original JSON file. So what will happen is that your server will get stuck here, and it will not be able to process any other requests because our main event loop is blocked. So this is why you will parse the JSON in especially large JSON, not small JSON, large JSON in a separate thread. All right, so hope it helps